The life and times of James Fintan Lawlor in 10 minutes, which obviously will be a bit abbreviated. Now, the purpose of the James Fintan Lawlor School is to celebrate in his own county of Laois a great Irish patriot, a visionary, a writer and a thinker. It is also to allow us an opportunity to think about where we as a people are now and where we are going. James Fintan's vision of Ireland and his analysis of how to radically change it was revolutionary in the 1840s and still has relevance today. His powerful intellect, his radical solutions to challenges, and his explosive writings laid a path to Irish independence. His ideas and writings have been embraced to this day by people of various views and opinions. His admirers included Michael Davitt, Jim Larkin, Eamon de Valera, James Connolly and Arthur Griffith. Jim Larkin said there were only two Irishmen he admired, Michael Davitt and Fintan Lawlor, and he named the Irish Transport and General Workers' Union Pipe Band in honour of James Fintan Lawlor. And indeed, they played at the unveiling of the statue 7 years ago, the James Fintan Lawlor Pipe Band played it in. In an Ireland stricken with famine, he called for the people of Ireland to assert their rights to the land of Ireland. In a country where 8,000 landlords held 8 million people to ransom, he called for the land of Ireland for the people of Ireland. Fintan Lawlor famously said, Ireland her own and all therein, from the sod to the sky, the soil of Ireland for the people of Ireland, to have and to hold from God alone who gave it, to have and to hold to them and their heirs forever, without suit or service, faith or fealty, rent or render to any power under heaven. James Fintan Lawlor, the eldest of 12 children of Patrick and Anne Lawlor of Tinnakill, County Laois, then Queen's County, was born on the 10th of March 1807. His father was a substantial and prosperous farmer. James Fintan, who was always sickly and in poor health, was educated at home and later in Carlow Lay College. While he was apprenticed for a while to Dr. Jacob in Portlaoise, most of his life was spent in relative obscurity and seclusion. He only came to widespread public attention when he was 40 years of age, with a series of letters between 1847 and 1849 to firstly the Nation, and later when the Nation was suppressed, he wrote for and was joint editor of the Irish Felon. Ireland in the 1830s was involved in the political struggle for repeal of the Act of Union with Britain. The Act of Union of 1800 had been imposed by Britain after the 1798 rebellion. The repeal of the Union movement was led by Daniel O'Connell. He had succeeded in achieving Catholic emancipation in 1829, which earned him the popular title of Liberator. To forward his objectives, O'Connell had earlier allied himself in the House of Commons with the Whigs. He organised monster meetings around Ireland to mobilise the people. O'Connell, as a pacifist, refused to directly confront the authorities when his meeting at Clontarf was prescribed. In any case, O'Connell's leadership of Irish nationalism was soon to be challenged by a new movement called Young Ireland. The Young Irelanders were idealistic nationalists who had first supported O'Connell, but increasingly found O'Connell's political pragmatism upsetting and unacceptable to them. The leading figures of Young Ireland included Thomas Davis, John Mitchell and Charles Gavin Duffy, and their ideas were propagated by their newspaper, The Nation. The fight for the hearts and minds of Irish nationalists was soon overtaken by a dreadful calamity, famine. Over half of Ireland's population of over 8 million people depended heavily on the potato. The struggle of O'Connell and his repealers, on the one hand with the British government and on the other with those of his sometime allies in Young Ireland, became rather unreal when the potato failed. The reality for many people in Ireland from 1845 to 1852 was that society was collapsing, millions dying or fleeing the country, and the main consideration for most people was how to stay alive. When James Fintan Lawlor began writing publicly from 1847 to 1849, firstly in The Nation and later in the Irish Felon, His writings were so powerful and his ideas so wide-ranging that he has been admired ever since by nationalists, land reformers, socialists and Republicans. What were his ideas and why were they so influential? Ireland in the 1840s was a country subjugated not only by a colonial power, England, but also by an unjust landlord system, which for millions of people meant a life without hope, without sufficient food, or prospects of a better future. When the potato failed, disaster struck and 1 million Irish died. While Fintan Lalor embraced the idea of a free Ireland, he was full of contempt for a repeal movement which did not seek to give the land to the people of Ireland. Lalor yoked together the demand for Irish freedom with that of land reform to give Irish people a decent existence. This coupled demand led ultimately to Irish freedom. Patrick Pearse said, "Tone sounded the gallant reveille of democracy in Ireland, but the man who gave it its battle cries was James Fintan Lalor." It is obvious that he had the same hatred of injustice as his family. His father, Pat, played a leading role in the Tithe Wars and in the repeal movement, and was an MP for Queen's County and a close ally and supporter of Daniel O'Connell. His brother Peter led the gold miners' uprising at Ballarat in Australia, and another brother, Richard, was a young Irelander and later a Parnellite MP. James Fintan Lalor's beliefs were first outlined in his letter of January the 11th, 1847 to Gavin Duffy, editor of The Nation. He stressed three basic views: his opposition to repeal in itself, the importance of the land question, and his rejection of exclusive reliance on moral force. His arguments were developed through his 3 letters to The Nation and his 7 that he wrote for the Irish Felon. The logic of his own arguments led him to state in his final letter, "Meanwhile, however, remember this, that somewhere and somehow and by someone a beginning must be made. Who strikes the first blow for Ireland? Who draws first blood for Ireland? Who wins a wreath that will be green forever?" James Fintan Lalor rejected Daniel O'Connell's repeal of the Union movement, which was supported by his father. He did so because he sought something much more radical, the repeal of the conquest of Ireland. This young Irelander died at the age of 42 in December 1849. His funeral cortege was the length of O'Connell Street, and 25,000 people followed his coffin to Glasnevin Cemetery. Apart from his inspired writings, Lalor sought to organise and encourage direct action on behalf of the downtrodden Irish tenant farmers. In what the historian T.W. Moody called a white-hot appeal by Lalor at the height of the famine to the tenant farmers, Lalor called on them to save themselves from starvation and overthrow British authority by a general strike against rent. This failed, but his words and actions inspired the Land League 30 years later, and his writings were also extremely influential in inspiring the 1916 leaders, Pearse and Connolly. With his great advocacy of a free Ireland and a free Irish people, he has surely won a wreath that will be green forever. Thank you.